Welcome to the Funded Now What podcast with your host, Andrew Lee Miller, brought to you by GrowthExpertz. You are in store for a chat about funding, marketing, startups, and all things growth.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Funded Now What podcast, where you get to hear exclusively directly from the mouth of founders who've raised at least $1 million on their startup, how they did it, tips, tricks, things that make it a little bit less stressful. And then I, Andrew Startups, also teach you how to get growth post-funding. So I'm super excited for this episode because I've got Erica Tuggle, who has a huge, crazy background, which we're going to talk about, but she is the founder and CEO of Cookonnect, which is a really cool startup based in Atlanta, where essentially you can get cooks to come in and prep your meals for the week. And if you're as busy as I am, you know the ROI is massive on this. Erica, I know I spend like 2 to 3 hours in the kitchen a day, and I do not have that time to give up. Thank you so much for being here, Erica.
Thank you. I know I'm excited.
Awesome. So give us, I just gave a little intro, but tell us a little bit about Cookonnect. Why'd you start it and how did you raise $1 million?
Yeah. So you described it so perfectly. And why I started it is exactly what you hit on, because we spend a lot of time planning our meals and trying to manage everything else, no matter what stage of life you're in, no matter, what you're dealing with from professionally, personally. Meals is like the consistent challenge that people have, and doing it well is hard. Like there are a lot of convenient options where you can order meals or you can have something delivered, but often people feel like they're sacrificing either their health or quality, and there just isn't anything as good as a homemade meal. And so when I was working, I was at Coca-Cola, which I'm sure we'll get into, working, my career was continuing to progress there. So I'm working even more, I'm traveling more people and things to manage. And then, of course, I have my family growing as well. So I had 2 kids while I was at Coke. Wow. And this meals was like the thing that kept presenting a problem and honestly felt like something we couldn't outsource well. And so I did a lot of initial digging with other moms and professionals and found out they were struggling with the same thing, but some of them actually had found people to help them out, whether it was a neighbor or a nanny might do the cooking as well.
Wow.
They were bringing in people from, they weren't necessarily professional chefs, but they were finding people to just get this done. And I really loved that model. I felt like it was accessible for me. It didn't feel like, we couldn't do it. They were essentially paying these people what they would pay a babysitter, but for the time they were spending doing meals. And so Cookonnect really came out of that. It was a solution to how do we create an accessible, more affordable personal chef model, essentially, and do that so that people can control their time more and do what they really want to do with their time, but also control their health more, since food is such an important determinant of health. And so, so that's how we got to exactly what it is today, which is a platform that cooks and chefs use to manage a personal chef business, and then also a marketplace that customers use to find someone to do their meal prep, as you said.
Awesome. I love that origin story. I actually call that the FUBU, for us, by us origin story. And I look for that when I work with companies and when I invest in companies, because a founder that starts out solving their own problems is someone who will have the passion to continue forever, not somebody that's just like, I'm going to make $1 million with this thing. And it really makes sense. I mean, who is busier than a brand director at Coca-Cola with 2 kids? Seriously. So I literally can't even imagine. I don't know how you do all that, but that is black girl magic if you're in essence. So, I don't need to understand it because I can't do it. So you segued right into my biggest question is, what is the biggest difference being a startup founder versus being brand director for one of the most famous brands in the entire world?
Oh, yeah. Well, resources. One word, resources. And that means a lot of different things. It's not just the money, honestly. I think that's obviously a big part, and it's critical for, early stage founders to get that support from a funding perspective. But it's also honestly just the people, right? Like I was very used to and comfortable with having a large team behind me, whether that was my direct team or, colleagues who were my cross-functional partners across the organization. And obviously it's a much bigger business than what, I'm managing now, but still having just experts in kind of every, like whether it's pricing or customer partnership development or, distribution, like all those things, you have experts essentially to go to who are working towards the same goals, have the same priorities as you. And, for the most part, organizations struggle with that, but for the most part, and they're amazing, right? Like brands like Coca-Cola find amazing people. Right. So now, leading a startup, nobody knows who you are. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And you've got to find great people and get them excited enough to work with you, and to believe with you. And that's really hard. In the beginning, as you're doing most of it yourself. So that was also a really steep learning curve for me. Like I had never managed influencers before, right? We had agencies who would do that for us and internal partners. Now I'm the one, trying to create the relationships and figure out how to get the deliverables and all that fun stuff. So it's definitely, that's probably been the biggest difference. But honestly, it makes you know your business better than anyone else as well. Of course. And so there's a gift there.
Absolutely. And the other gift is when you're working with a brand that nobody knows, and this is one of the first things I teach founders I work with them. I have clients right now, the two founders are ex-Meta and ex-Snap, and we can't do that. We can't do this. I'm like, yes, you can. Nobody knows you. Nobody cares. With Coca-Cola, you make one small mistake, the whole world knows about it. It's on CNN or something. Whereas with your startup, you can be more risky. You can take those risks. You can try new things, because if it doesn't work, it was only your time that was really wasted. And a lot of times founders are really protective of the brand, but like you got to just keep moving and keep, throwing spaghetti against the wall. And that's the benefit. And that's why startups win in opposition to big companies often, because they can't move past that bureaucratic red tape. And so it sounds like you're hit the ground running with that. That's awesome. Let's go right into the money. You set the segue up again for me. So, how are you able to raise this funding? Atlanta has a very vibrant tech scene. I know you're in Techstars. That'll definitely help, but it's still nowhere near as easy as it is in San Francisco. And then obviously being a female founder, I mean, I'm sure your previous experiences helped open some doors, but like, how are you able to raise this? Like, let's walk us through how many calls that was. What did it look like?
Raising money is no joke, as everybody will say. Right. Definitely learned a lot in the process that I will apply next time. So hopefully this is helpful. So I think it started with where I think a lot of people start, which to your point are connections and then list building. And I think I learned a lot in that process, even just in the very beginning. So in like my first month of trying to raise, I learned very quickly I need a huge list of people to reach out to, because you're just not going to hear back from everyone. You're not going to get the intros. Even people, everybody's busy. So you might have to hound someone for a couple of weeks before you get an intro, right? And you want to move the process as quickly as you can. And so, and I'll circle back to that because there's another learning in that too. But so having a huge list to start with in terms of people that I thought were well aligned to what we were doing, their theses, et cetera. I also started very quickly to think even more about that. And to your point, like geographic area, I think does matter. Making sure that I was talking to people who were also very interested in supporting underrepresented founders. So really getting tighter. I think I initially started, when you hear big list, you think, okay, like let me get whoever I can. And that's how I when I went that direction, that's what I did. Then I had to pull it in and say, well, wait, there are tons of investors out there. So let's make sure that you're actually pulling in the ones that are going to be most interested in what you're doing and who you are. And so that was kind of the second take I took on it after about a month of not having a lot of great traction and being like, all right, what's going on here? I wasn't talking to the right people. So I took that turn, and that meant that I did go beyond Atlanta as well to some more consumer focused markets when I was talking to investors. And I'd say another kind of key piece of it was being prepared. So, having the data room set up and having that really tight, having follow-ups really tight. So for every investor, I had obviously the follow-up email, but if we got to a second conversation, I started to build a file for them where it was like, here are the key things that they asked me about, my answers to those questions. So they had a good recap of the things that were most important for them. And I think
Love that.
that type of thing was really helpful to help the conversations continue, I believe, and also honestly help me to make sure I was targeted in
Of
my
course.
conversations with them. So that was probably one of the other things. I ended up doing probably, like I look back at it, I don't think we didn't quite reach 100 calls,
Wow.
which is good,
Yeah.
but we had a lot of calls, and then a lot that were unanswered, right? Too,
Of
within
course.
that. So we actually had meetings with a little over, I think it was around 60 or so, and then
Wow.
I also do events, and like a lot of startup founders, you're going to go to whatever investor event you can go to, meet people, do that
Yeah.
pitch, like try to get that follow up. And so that's actually where I ended up meeting Slauson and Co., who invested in our pre-seed and took our pre-seed around. And I met them at an event, did my pitch, and then the follow ups in the process. But it's really, I mean, it's about organization. It's about being relentless. That's one of the things everybody told me. They're like, give yourself, if you don't want a long fundraising process, but know that like, if you just keep hitting at it, you will probably, find funders who are interested in what you're doing, as long as you're showing traction and you've got, a nice story behind you in terms of who you are and what you're trying to do. And I found those things to be true, but it is super hard. I mean, there was a lot in your question, but it's super hard. Oh, and the thing I was going to come back to, when you think about fundraising and just kind of like timing, I got an advice probably in the middle of my fundraising journey for pre-seed to think to start the fundraise actually before you start the fundraise,
right.
And that's some of the relationship building with investors, but it's also like, if you're going to want to talk to an investor in, October, then start to try to get the warm introductions, the month before, whatever it is. Because like I said, even that can take some time. And to keep your process tight, I think that's really important too. So there's like a fundraise that needs to be well orchestrated.
Wow.
That I did not know.
I have not heard that on this startup. And it makes sense. I mean, like if you're planning for a huge trip, you do the pre-planning, and so it's the same thing. I mean, the more prep, the less stress when you're actually trying to do it. But that is a ton of value. And I don't think anybody's talked about the power of events when it comes to fundraising as well. And I mean, I have, from a marketing point of view, whenever I work with founders, I'm like, go to 2 or 3 events, even if they're not super targeted, just to practice your pitch on, people that don't matter, but like aren't as important as the people like those really big logo investors that you want to pitch. You'll get it down if you do 10 events a month and pitch. And so that's really, really solid advice. I love the organization. Going back to that organization, did you use an actual CRM or just a Google Sheet, or like, how did you manage that?
Yeah, I'm a big G Sheets person. So
Me too.
I use Google Sheets,
Nice.
and just had everybody kind of organized in there. And then I use Google Docs to have files for, different investors.
Makes sense. Love the startup hustling. I know there is a tool out there that's like a CRM for fundraising founders. I can't think of it. If I find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But that's amazing advice for any founder, and really very multifaceted. So I love that. And that's probably why it didn't take you 100 calls to get there, no matter where you were. It's because you were doing all of that, which again, I don't know how you get that done with the kids. Are you taking the kids to the events, or like, how do you do all that?
I have a good partner.
Better than good. Shout out to him or her.
Yeah.
I don't know, him or her, but yeah, I mean, I did stalk you a little bit on social media, so I saw him, but shout out to him. What's his name? We'll give him a shout out.
Nathan.
Nathan, thank you for, all you do in the background to make your wife shine. My wife is also a Black female founder, and I do a little bit. I won't give myself too much of a shout out. Just the marketing side I handle. But that's really, we don't have kids. So she's still amazing, but we don't have kids. I just literally can't imagine. So shout out to Nathan. Awesome. So you got the money. Now what? That's literally the name of the podcast. So tell me, what are you doing post fundraising? When are you going to raise the next round? What stage are you at growth wise? Let's dive in.
Yeah. It's such a great name, because I think that is kind of like, you work so hard, to get the checks. And then you're like, oh my gosh, we're here. We're finally here. And yes, you have a plan. That's what you sold in, but it's right. A jolting moment. And so For us, or for me, really, it was really about getting the team in place initially. And so there were two things I knew we needed to be really strong. One was, of course, the tech side. I am not a technical founder. And so we found an awesome senior software engineer who has been building our new product, which is a key part of this phase for us. We also found a VP of operations because we needed to get better about, KPIs and tracking our metrics, understanding just like what's happening and what are the interdependencies within the business, so that we could then action those things. And then I know growth marketing, right, is also really important to us. But those were the first two that we wanted to build out on the team, and then work beyond that for some of the other pieces. The other thing that was really important to us, which we're working on right now, as I mentioned, was developing the product. We started on no code, so bubble.io.
Wow.
And it got us pretty far, and we're still actually on it right now.
Got you $1 million. Shout out to Bubble. That's amazing.
That's true. And we have
what a time to be alive.
Huh?
What a time to be alive that you can raise millions of dollars without any code.
On a no code. Yeah, seriously. There are so many tools, actually. I remember talking to someone, they were like, there's no easier time than now to have a startup and to, hopefully be successful. And so and that is true. And every day that becomes more and more true. And so that Bubble is one of the tools we used. We have a great developer on Bubble, Matt, who helped us, for over a year build that out. And so, but now we've kind of reached the limit. And so now we're building our own. And so that's been a big piece of what we need to do before we get to the next stage and the next fundraise. And so we're launching that in January, actually, which is super exciting.
Awesome.
We also needed to get our marketing model right and figure out where one of the big questions we get is, how is this repeatable? And how is this, something that can be sustained? You have a lot of people involved. There are a lot of operations involved. Our confidence is in the technology and also in the marketing and building the brand, but also the mechanisms for getting users in. And so that idea of what is the marketing model applied not only to the chefs, but also to the customers.
Of course.
And so we've spent the better part of this pre-seed phase really trying to understand those things and find the tools that we can use to grow. And then the last piece is actually a rebrand. We saw a lot of opportunity in creating a more organically shareable brand, in getting more consistent in how we show up, and also in creating a brand that gave us more space as we think about how we want to grow the business. And so we'll be launching that in January as well. And so hold on. You're changing the name? We are. Yes.
I mean, it makes sense to have, you better have the most badass brand of all time, considering your background. That part, I assume you didn't hire a consultant for. You didn't.
We did not.
Yeah. That's cool. We had an
agency helping us, but we did. Yeah. But, so it's cool. And I think it's going to be really meaningful for the business, too, in terms of what we've seen. And then there are just some I guess, I don't know if you want to call it logistical or other things that, Cookonnect can be spelled wrong. It's hard to say for some people. It's also very transactional. It doesn't really communicate in the bigness of what we think this idea is. So all those things will be addressed. So those have been the big things we need to hit from a growth perspective.
Wow.
We were doing really well going in terms of into the raise, in terms of our traction. So we wanted to continue that 3x plus growth. And so we're continuing to do that, and we're continuing to focus on that. And really our goal for the next raise, which I know you also asked about, is the end of Q1 next year.
Awesome.
So around March, April, we will be back in the market. We will look very different, but I'm so excited because it's really applying so much of what we've been learning, and we've been applying every day, but some things are hard to do within some of the constraints we had. And now we're letting go of those, which I'm super excited about.
That is awesome. Wow. A lot to touch on there. Let's see. Where do I want to start? Let's talk about post relaunch for the main business. We'll get to the new software-based, Cook POS or whatever that is in a second. But the thing that I didn't know about that before the call. So the thing that I'm most focused on is obviously the Cookonnect model of helping people with the line cooks and stuff. Is it the focus just on Atlanta in January with this new brand?
In January it will be, but we do intend to expand next year as well.
Of course. Yeah, no, I mean, San Francisco, New York, places where people are I mean, LA also, I was privy to a lot of the early data at Postmates because a friend was a senior level executive there. And we thought San Francisco would be crushing it. In LA, people were just like, pay anything for convenience. It's just the busiest place in the world. And, you know, the money goes past the time. Like, so Cookonnect customers, if you have more money than you have time, then there's no reason why you shouldn't do this, period. Because time is the one thing that you can't get back. But going to this Atlanta new launch of this new brand, walk me through a little bit of your marketing playbook so I can poke holes in it and give you advice on it.
I'd love that. So we have found two channels that work really well for us. And I can tell you which ones we haven't found success in. So we found that referrals work really well for us. So growing organically, most of the customers we get are coming from other customers, which is great.
Wow.
It's great. And so, but like you want to, right. How do you think about that when you're trying to grow your customer base so you can have more of that referral activity when you want to encourage even more of that, right? What are some things you should be doing? So that has worked really well for us. So there are some things we have in place to bolster that. So we'll talk about that. The other thing that's worked really well are events. And we treat these almost like micro events. We've done in-home tastings with, a group of professionals that, connect with exactly what you're saying, less time, not as much time as they have money, so they can buy back some of that time. And those actually do very well, not as scalable, but in this stage, like if we put more energy behind it, we'll hit our goals. Yeah, exactly. And we've started to do more with like professional, like organizations and their women's groups and that sort of things.
Okay.
Women are usually responsible for this meal prep thing. So as we think about that, what hasn't worked, so we've tried digital ads. They have not worked for us, at least not yet. We've tried I know we talked about LinkedIn, which does seem to have some promise for us with the right targeting. And so now we're taking some of those learnings and we're applying them in the relaunch where we're going to really focus on bolstering that event activity. So we've actually brought on a couple of contractors to really their main goal is to just get as many of those on the calendar as possible and manage them through to hopefully conversions. We've also, from a referrals perspective, we've actually found our customers are referring, as I mentioned, which is really important, but there are other referral sources we're not tapping into. Nutritionists, even doctors. We have personal trainers. So we're working on a very local level to strike relationships with those individuals now as affiliates, essentially. So there's a benefit for them, but they're essentially bringing their customer to us because the ones that we see most engaged are those that are dealing with health things and they're trying to manage to either better health or allergies or, that sort of thing.
Makes sense.
So those two are the channels. Those are two of like the primary channels. And then you'll see us do more online because the one I forgot to mention is organic. Instagram does do very well for us as well in terms of driving signups. And so as we learn that, our goal and when we go into this relaunch is to have much more consistent and just relevant social, organic social content that customers can connect with.
Okay. Lots of stuff. I'm going to go from the back. We'll talk about Instagram first.
Yeah.
First thing, when you're focused only on one geolocation, do you have a Cookonnect ATL account? Are you really? So I recommend doing that. If you're already thinking ahead to having an international or a national brand in multiple cities, you want your one corporate account. But you want your geo-local accounts so you can talk about Atlanta, things happening in Atlanta, influencers in Atlanta that you can highlight. You want to use the Atlanta hashtags. This is going to drive local discovery for people there. And so that's going to be harder to do the longer the time goes on. So you want to break that off as soon as possible. You could start grab other city handles, be reposting content and say coming soon and start a landing page. And then when you launch in a city, you will have 100, 200 interested potential customers. And you can even make the landing page, Cookonnect. I know there's a new brand, but I don't know what it is. Cookonnect.com/Dallas or whatever. And people go there and in the social media bio, it says put your email to vote for us to come to your city sooner. And then once it hits 200, it's worth going and launching in that city. So breaking the social media down by city for a business like this, at least this in the scale mode, really makes sense. You're going to end up having these city managers. You're going to end up having these localized marketers, and it'll be easier for them to manage their own local social media that way. So that's a good thing to start working on. With the referral stuff, awesome working with the nutritionist. I think there's also a big B2B play. So, companies taking care of their own executives, it's almost a no-brainer. You send them a PDF, it costs this much, and it's a perk. So not so much in Atlanta because there's only a handful of tech companies really crushing it, but cities like San Francisco, and LA and New York, where they have to be super competitive to get top engineering talent specifically. Like anything that they can add perk wise is a huge opportunity for them, and they will just invest in it. The next thing I think with the referral stuff is to incentivize current customers. So you didn't mention it, but I'm sure you have at least worked into some automated emails, but really going big on giving them like a week free or a month free for every customer. Whatever the LTV is of a customer, you can give at least 20% of that to a referrer. And really, making it experiential too. Like, so maybe the top referrer in Atlanta every year gets like a premium food, or like we'll pay, whatever. Usually with this type of target demographic, money is not going to move them. So you get $50 for every referral. They don't care, but they want to help their friends. We want to be, looked at as someone who suggests really good things to each other. Like this is an internal motivation. So if you just play along the lines of that, you can get customers really moving the needle for you by incentivizing that. So that's another thing I would really recommend. You didn't mention PR. So I'm going to imagine, don't go into it. I'm sure you're doing a little bit, but I think that with the brand relaunch, that's the main thing you would focus on. I don't think you need to hire an agency for it. It's essentially like, the fundraising stuff you did. We build a CRM, a list of all the local media. You probably already know them. You're physically based in Atlanta. I wouldn't bother getting any PR outside of Georgia itself, just because they won't be able to do anything unless you want to do that idea that I mentioned. You, at the bottom of the website, can have all the landing pages for all the next 10 cities that you want to launch in. And it can just say coming soon, enter your email address there. And then that way that can start to get Google and SEO rankings, so it's not going to get much because there isn't a lot of content on the page, but Cookonnect.com/Dallas or San Francisco, at least you can set up those social media. You can start posting on it, start talking about, we need to come to your city. And then you never know, you could get partners, affiliates, investors that want to, franchise or be involved from those cities. So that would make sense to then accidentally get some national PR on this. I mean, I think it's a really interesting story. Everybody's like half in the office, half working remotely. This really makes sense to me that it's a good thing at the beginning of 2025 too, where everyone wants to get healthier and diet is like a main New Year's resolution. So the more organic I can see the PR opportunity, the more likely we are to get picked up. And so I see a lot of legs here from that. So that's really great for the relaunch, because you get a lot of inbound interest, you get a lot of link building for SEO. You can put those articles in the content from that. For instance, you get on like, Good Morning Atlanta or whatever the television show is, which you'd be surprised. It's very easy to do. You have such a cool thing. I mean, again, no offense to Atlanta, there isn't a million startups doing what you've done. I mean, not many at all, especially from such a big brand with kids. I mean, it's an insane story. So you should be on television, So getting that content and putting it into those digital ads will change the game for you on those ads as well. It changes because it no longer is looked at as us talking about ourselves. It's this trusted person on television saying this is a huge thing. Those ads will really work. Also with the ads, you mentioned using influencers, and do it like whichever content looks like it's working best organically from an influencer, hire that person to make some ads. There are other platforms like Billo, and I can't think of the new one that's out very recently that I just saw at TechCrunch Disrupt, which is like a marketplace for buying content from influencers. The name evades me right now, but I think that if the content looks great organically, then create a write-up like, hey, we're looking to invest in some ads. And then again, it changes from us talking about ourselves to this person we trust talking about the brand. If you have a customer that's been a huge referral engine, you can also offer them like, hey, we'll give you a month free if you'll record some videos for us. You give them guidelines. You can record a dummy video yourself to show them. And, the more organic, the more real it looks like, the better. So it doesn't have to be this highly produced stuff. You're an early stage startup. Find a customer that absolutely could not survive without Cookonnect anymore. Getting that person on camera, it's felt by the people on the other end of the phone or whatever. Yeah. And so that's not costly. Again, you can reinvest. I mean, you can just give them what they love more than money, Cookonnect. And so I think if you do all of those things, plus all the stuff you already know about, you're going to be really well on your way. Who's handling your marketing? What are you using agencies? Are you doing it all yourself? What's that look like?
Yeah, it's a mix. So it's funny, right before this, we had an execution call, project planning call with the team, because a lot of us are leaning in on various places. And so myself and our customer success lead, Taylor, we're calling the affiliates, having meetings with them and trying to get them signed up, right, to be a part of the program, to refer to us. We've got a growth marketing contractor who's working on, and actually I love this landing page idea. I think he just needs to do that. But who's working on some of the more digital marketing pieces, like the site updates, and which is why I mentioned that. But this idea of and managing influencers and some of that, we're actually looking at the agency that helped us with the rebrand, potentially stepping in there. So we're looking at kind of a mix of sources. I am really happy. You touched on so many good things, and it's good to hear your perspective on PR, because we have been looking at that, but we had been looking at, okay, maybe we just need a local PR agency to like blast this out and manage it. But to your point, in the past, we've done it ourselves. Like you said, here's the list. Let's get the emails out, get the phone calls out, and see who bites. And so maybe that's another way. And we do now have some relationships now that people who have covered us that might be willing to do it again. So it's good to help me think about that differently and think about referrals differently too. Because our customers, you're right, they don't need the money. Often they're referring without using their referral codes, and we just get an email and we find out. Yeah, exactly. But this idea of how do we give them experiences and clout, I think is really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One or two more things, and then I promise I'll let you go. So one, you mentioned earlier, and I don't want to be like too controversial talking about genders, but you're like, women usually make these decisions. Like, are you not seeing like single dudes as customers? Because I feel like, first of all, in my household, I do all the cooking. So I don't believe in traditional gender roles. I know like Nathan probably also steps up more than the average dude, it sounds like. So I think he's probably agreeing with me there. But also I just feel like, at least in my world in San Francisco tech bro scene, like tons of money, no time, and no ability to cook at all. So I think you got a ton of customers waiting for you in San Francisco. So are you not approaching that target demographic also in Atlanta?
Yeah, we have. What we found, and we really found this more through targeting different ads, is that they were less responsive than we did moms and single dads, and then also just males, and what we call and then this was a blended group, but like high achievers. So like those people who are just like, I need to figure out the business, whatever, my career is, make the money and let everything else go. And so anyway, those were some of the groups that we looked at, and the moms still performed higher than the best. So for now, but I totally agree with you. And we do have customers that represent that target. Because I think you're right. There's definitely something there. And what we do here, which is interesting a lot of times, is it is also a joint decision. Because this is, if you're getting multiple services or having this ongoing, someone coming to your home, it's also, multiple services on top of services. It gets a little bit, more higher ticket. So it ends up being the partners coming together to make that decision, which we often hear like, okay, let me go have this conversation, then we'll come back.
Let me give you a theory. I think you're able to speak to those moms because you are that mom.
Yeah.
And so it's easier, again, back to that for us, by us idea, in the beginning, because your origin story is so organic and real, it's easier for you to speak to those people. But doing some LinkedIn automation, I talk about it like 5 times on this podcast already. It's not working as much as it used to, but still I get 2 calls a week out of a $50 a month LinkedIn automation tool. I use Duck Soup right now because Conversify went out of business, but there are tons. Apollo.
Yeah.
There's so many, but Duck Soup has always been the best for me. DUX Soup, shout out to them. They should give me free credit how much I talk about it. But $50 a month, the ROI is insane. It's six figures a year for me and GrowthExpertz at least.
It's amazing.
But for you, the messaging is really the difference. And I think when you're talking to, like tech bros or these busy, high qualified people or whatever the term you said was, high achievers, that was it. It's like a one-liner, like, hey, how much time are you spending on your food or time and money? And I think people don't realize if they're just Uber Eating every once in a while, it's way more expensive than monthly thing of Cookonnect. So if you know and preempt what their responses are in the messaging, like very short message, one-liner, you get a lot of interesting people. Like, hey, what if I could, hey, so I don't know if off the top of my head, it's a little hard, but hey, are you wasting over 5 hours a week of your time on food? Are you eating as healthy as you could be? Are you spending $1,000 a month on Uber Eats? I mean, that sounds insane to most people in the country listening, but like these high achiever, busy single people do that. And it's a complete waste. And not to mention the health thing. I think the reason why I love automating messaging too is you start to figure out which features or value props people respond most to. And then that goes in and helps you with the advertising as well. You can pay to learn that. But, another thing I wanted to say, $1 million is not very much. And then you already scared me on this call by how many people you've hired and full time and this and that. And you will need to raise that round in Q1. But hopefully, I think everybody believes 2025 is going to be way better for that than 2024. So I don't want to speak into anything. I'm sure you'll get it. But that's a lot of burn rate. And so I don't want you to have to use paid advertising to figure shit out. So doing the automated LinkedIn outreach targeted to these busy professionals, you'll start to figure out which messaging, which value props really work. And that's really important for a branding relaunch because you're going to throw a bunch of new spaghetti at the wall. And you'll figure out what works pretty quickly with that. And so I think that's probably I guess maybe the last thing I would say is around ad platforms. So if you mentioned Instagram is organically working, just keep using Instagram and Facebook. It's not anywhere near as expensive as it has to be when you use lookalike audiences. So you upload a lookalike. There's job title targeting still on Facebook that actually works really well for this. Relationship targeting, when you're geo-specific, and Atlanta as well as you do, you could target by neighborhoods too and zip codes. So that'll help you figure out the income level. Back in the day, so I was very, very early, first 1,000 advertisers ever on Facebook. You could literally target by race and by income and everything. It was crazy. That's targeting is still there on the lookalike back end. You can no longer select Black people or something, but you can select people who are fans of Essence or, different things like that. But anyway, that doesn't matter for this. So I think just job, zip code, family, relationship status is enough to really make this win. The real key for the ads is the content. And going back to what I said, using influencers, you want to try at least 5 ad variations for every single campaign that you make. And a lot of times people don't do that. So just really quickly, because I can go on forever, I like trying an ad of the founder in a video or an image, like you with the kids and with Nathan might actually, with a whole bunch of food out in front of you in an image might actually grab someone's attention more than a video. So I test video versus image, long text versus short text. Again, like I said in the outreach message to the random high achievers, what if you could save 10 hours a week and eat healthy for less?
Right.
Just that one line. Someone's going to be like, what the hell? I got to click to learn more about this. That might perform better than trying to say everything in an ad that tells them too much and then they click and they go away. So just those 4 types of variations, that's just really 1 or 2 pieces of content. But you could try you talking, an influencer talking, the organic earned media that you're about to get in Atlanta for the launch. So you have 3 different types of, and then a customer talking. So that's 4 different types of content right there. And if you make each of those into variations, like I mentioned, you've got 10 or 15 different ad types. The key is to just bid really low. It's only focused on one geo. There isn't going to be as many advertisers as if you're spraying across the whole United States. So, bid really low in the beginning. And people don't realize you can run ads on Reddit, on Quora, on LinkedIn, on everything. When you're just focused on Atlanta, bid 10 cents a click and it'll still show. It might only be $5 a day and spend, but you'll start to get understanding over time of which campaign and which type of ad works. And then you can increase the budget as you figure those things out, cut the fat, get leaner. And there's almost no way that won't work.
I love that. Awesome. Awesome.
Any questions on any of that? I just kind of brain dumped everything.
I know, and it was all really good. And I love even some of the examples of how to talk more kind of directly and succinctly to people, because I do think that's huge and important for our target too. It's just busy. You talked a little bit, you mentioned this about like PR in terms of being like trusted sources, influencers, trusted sources. I think that's also, that struck with me because we're obviously, connecting people with pre-screened chefs to go into your home. Like there has to be a pretty good level of trust there. And that's something we've been thinking through. I'm wondering, like PR influencers, are there other trust sources that we should maybe be customers you mentioned as well?
Like Better Business Bureau, all that stuff is good to see on the homepage above the fold. Like it just subconsciously makes people feel trusted. But I think, your Google reviews, your Trustpilot reviews, it's only just seeing it in the first thing, I mean, beyond that, it's the videos. I mean, if the biggest issue is I don't want someone coming into my house, I don't think that's an early adopter customer for you.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Just like, okay, well then keep doing what you're doing. Sorry. Or go ahead and stick with Uber Eats. They drop it at your door. Like the value prop versus another service to me is this person actually comes in your home, learns what I have a meal prep solution myself when I live abroad. And I realized not only did I end up expanding the things that I eat because that person's in my house talking with me, but I ended up practicing Spanish all day and getting fluent in Spanish from living in Mexico. And, literally them being in your house is a value add. When there is pushback, again, that's what you learn from all this messaging. Like the first negative comment you get 1,000 times, someone's like, I don't want someone coming into my house. Then you have to preempt that in your marketing. Like, why is it beneficial that they come in your house? These people learn your diet. They learn from you. They're gone by 9 a.m. Whatever it is, you have to nip that in the butt beforehand. But I think there's tons of people out there that don't care, especially at this target.
Right.
Like when you have more money than time, people are just in your house all the time. I had a wealthy friend in New York at dinner the other day complain to me that her cleaning lady isn't gone till 1 p.m. And I was like, that's beyond first world problems. That is like rich people problems. And she's hurrying up her cleaning lady to get out of the house. I'm like, just clean your house yourself then. She was like, no, that's crazy. I'm not going to do that. Like, how could you complain that the person is too thorough? So my point is there's a lot of those kind of people out there, and those are the customers you're really trying to help, the people that don't mind someone being in their house and just desperately need the help. And I think, if you're listening to this and you don't realize that you are the customer, just track your hours that you're spending. I love cooking. I'm really anally retentive on the food I put into my body, but I also charge a lot for my time, and 10 hours a week in the kitchen is insane. And some of it is meditative for me, so I'll do it on the weekends, but the rest of it during the week, I would love to automate it. So I urge anyone listening to this, if you're in Atlanta, if you're not, then reach out to Cookonnect and tell them that they need to launch in your city. But I would love to give a promo code in the show notes or something for people from Atlanta.
Absolutely.
I'll shoot it to a couple friends of mine as well. I know a busy single dad in Atlanta who's in tech and startups that I think should invest in this. Real quick, what's the price point? We didn't even get into
it. Oh, great question. Yeah, we didn't talk about that. So when I say a more accessible model, you talked a lot about Uber Eats. We want to be competitive with that. So in Atlanta, we're at $20 per meal per person or per plate is the minimum. It does, depending on how much you order, it fluctuates from there. But if you're doing, call it 12, 16 meals with us, you're going to be right at that price point. And so it makes it completely doable. And we, make that price point happen through efficiencies, essentially in terms of, menu planning, the talent that's going to your home, all of that. What
a no-brainer. Last thing to think about, again, with these tech bros, because maybe it's more my world than your world, is we love taking out decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is a real thing. When you are an executive or a C-level person at a tech company, like myself, you're constantly making big decisions and
Yeah.
you don't realize how tiring that is. There's this stat that, like, chess players on a tournament burn 6,000 calories without moving out of the chair. Your brain really burns a ton of that energy and you get decision paralysis. So one thing we do in San Francisco, and I hate that it was, Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs that were the innovators in this, is we just wear the same shit every day. I'm starting to incorporate colors at 40 years old, just to, like, because my wife was like, please, every photo, all black. Really? You're not in a metal band? But I didn't realize, that the psychological effect of always wearing black. So now I've got some black colors, but solid colors. You'll never see me wear a logo. I'll never go to the mall and be like, oh my God, I need to do this and that, because I don't want to waste my time making those decisions. So I love wearing the same thing every day. I used to actually wear shirts that said Andrew Startups every day. I had 20 of the same shirts and that was all I would wear. And that helped me grow my business. And you guys are in that same vein.
Yeah.
Stop. I mean, that's why people go to Uber Eats and just pay whatever. I don't want to have to think about it. Boom, boom, done. So that is an actual value prop that I think you should test in your messaging. Like, stop wasting time thinking about healthy food options and instead automate it. And I mean, for me, it's my largest time investment of the day outside of work. So for most people, it is. I'm usually a slight innovator in a little bit everything. I was early on remote work. I was early in Bitcoin, early on ChatGPT, just a little bit. So whatever I'm saying is probably what the market is going to say a little bit. I'm not saying I'm an innovator, an influencer. I just, I've been lucky to invest in things that I feel that a little bit ahead of the market. And so I think that this is an absolute no-brainer. And if you want to come to San Francisco, we can definitely talk on doing that together. I'd love to make it happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all the amazing representation you put out there for little brown girls and everybody else around the world. Keep crushing it. And if I can ever be of assistance, please let me know. Erica, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Andrew.
That has been another episode of the Funded Now What podcast with your host, Andrew Lee Miller, brought to you by GrowthExpertz. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you really liked it, please share with other founders and entrepreneurs. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next episode.